I'm absolutely excited to welcome you all to another BFSI learning series. This is day 2 for KNOLSKAPE. This entire week has been blocked with a lot of thought leaders, senior HR and L&D folks, and business leaders coming in. To give you the context, India plans to add over 1.6 million qualified professionals to the BFSI sector. This ambitious target comes when the industry grapples, and we all are aware of that, with an estimated 40% attrition rate in 2024. Despite the turnover, the domain has also seen a 20-25% rise in entry-level hiring. But the question is, are these recruits truly proficient, even if not truly experienced? Now, with the convergence of technology, evolving regulatory compliances in the BFSI sector, and changing consumer expectations, a proactive approach to skilling is essential. And we are all aware of this conversation about skilling and reskilling. Now, the potential for L&D to reshape talent, prepare them for future-ready roles is enormous, especially in the BFSI sector. And anything new we try to do or to grapple with, the question is always on the ROI. To discuss this, we have a stellar panel today that will delve into measuring what matters, the ROI on talent development, quantity, and quality. Just a disclaimer, the discussion with the panel and the views expressed are based on their own individual capacity and don't represent the organizations that they are associated with. As I introduce the panel, I want to say that I genuinely admire these names for their industry experience and the inspiring initiatives that they've led in their organizations. To start with, we have Kaustubha Parkar, who is the Head of Learning and Development, Piramal Capital and Housing Finance Limited. With over 2 decades of experience, Kaustubha has led leadership capability development programs at national and global levels. His experience spans crafting competency frameworks and spearheading assessment and development centers across sales, manufacturing, and R&D. Absolutely delighted to have you with us, Kaustubha.
Thank you so much, Manu, for inviting me.
We also have Girish Kumar, who is the SVP HR L&D, Head of Leadership and Professional Development and Digital Learning at HDFC Bank Limited. Girish comes with over 25 years of experience creating customized and scalable learning solutions that benefit organizational capability development. A leader in spearheading business transformation through OD and change interventions, Girish has led teams at Wells Fargo, Adobe, HBM, and IBM. Absolutely delighted to have you with us, Girish.
Thank you, Manu, for having me. Thank you.
And we also have Sandeep Das, a friend, a thought leader, who is the SVP and Head Domain Training, Kotak Mahindra Bank. With a robust and diverse background in HR, LNOD, and DEI, Sandeep's experience spans banks, life insurance, NBFCs, real estate, and petroleum retail. With over 2 decades of experience, Sandeep's strategic vision and hands-on experience continues to spearhead transformation initiatives with Kotak Bank, his current role, where he leads a unified training team across verticals. Absolutely delighted to have you with us, Sandeep, and good to see you.
Thank you, Manu. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
So welcome, gentlemen, and we look forward to a 60-minute insightful discussion. There's going to be a lot of questions coming your way and would love to hear your thoughts. Just to add a little more context for the interest of our audience before I shoot the first question, maximizing the return on investment of talent management is crucial for businesses. And why it's important, it's to make informed decisions, effectively allocate resources, and showcase the value of their talent management initiatives. So my first question to the panel, what qualitative and quantitative methods do you follow to measure the ROI on talent management and development? And maybe we could be fastest finger first. Anyone wants to pick up this question?
Yeah, so thanks, Manu. Let me take this question up.
Perfect.
So when we talk about ROI and what methods do we usually measure, the first method that we usually measure is that is the business able to define what challenge they want us to solve for them? Because that's a question that we start from for all our learning interventions. And once we have defined that, what is the challenge, we try to quantify that. In case this challenge is not solved, what is the impact on business? Can you
Right.
specify in terms of number? And then there are other variables too. Learning cannot be held accountable for any of the business matrices, right? There are other parts. So training is one of the part of the overall system that kind of holds that space up. So we exactly then try to establish the fact that what proportion of the challenge can be solved through learning and what are the other important aspects of the challenge which if not taken care of will make the learning fail. So these are some important discussion that we have, and that's where the matrices get defined.
Sure.
And once that happens is then what we do is to uh, uh, find out what are the behaviors which will be required for us to make this change happen, right? If there is a change that is required in the business to solve a challenge, what are the behaviors and what are the skills required? So once we have defined those behaviors, defined those skills, and defined the current state, that's how we begin our intervention. So since we already know the challenge that we are solving, second, what is the current state? And what are the various behaviors and skill sets which are all defined by the business during our course of the conversation. So we play it back during the intervention at multiple stages, saying that this is what you wanted us to do, this is what we have done. And from a skill, it's easy. It's purely quantitative data. You do assessments, and then you figure out where people have landed up in terms of their skills, right? From knowledge and skills, assessment, role plays, and case studies. Behavior is more of quantitative data, which for that, we engage into a lot of listening with the managers, with the customers. We listen to multiple forums where these people, the learners, would be interacting, whether it is a customer, or whether it is an internal employee, whether it is uh, the supervisor. We try to gather feedback, and then at the end of it, look at the quantitative data or the quantitative element, business element that would eventually get impacted if you are able to solve the challenge. And that's how we end up looking at qualitative aspects and the quantitative aspects of uh, the learning intervention. But we start with why are we doing it, and if we don't do it, what challenge, what are we not solving?
Sure. Great point to start with. I think what you mentioned about it all starts with business defining the gaps and then things move ahead. Girish, Kaustubha, your take on that. Do you agree with what Sandeep? Is it quite similar or
Yeah.
is it something different?
Absolutely, man. I mean, what Sandeep has mentioned is the typical approach to any learning need, and starting with the discovery, as he was talking about, and how do we define some of the current state, the desired, sometimes depending upon which kind of solution you're looking at. You might also want to create a success profile of sorts if you're moving more towards the behavioral leadership side of the learning space. Then we look at, okay, where people are, use some of the tools and techniques to measure where they are today. Post a program offering is delivered, we can actually measure it again and see if there is any needle movement. So theoretically, we have touched upon the typical Kirkpatrick model, L1, as we call it, reaction after the session. I'm talking about the quantitative aspects. L2, the knowledge gained. It is difficult in the behavioral side of the house, but not impossible, I would say. In select programs, we also do L3. And as it goes beyond L3, that's where the qualitative aspects come in, right? What are those indirect indicators which probably, and I would use hashtag that word probably, has been enabled by assuming that the environment was stable in which the individual is operating in. This learning might have a contribution to make. So it can be various metrics. It can be business metrics. It can be an HR metric, which probably showing change because you have delivered something which was beneficial.
Super. So what I understand, HDFC overall is very particular about showing that impact, and Kirkpatrick model is what you would be following internally.
True. I mean, and some of the foundational ones like, reaction, getting to know how individuals received a learning program is right across as we go up.
Right.
It would be a little more selective in nature.
Right. Kaustubha, you want to add anything that's happening at
Before I talk about the matrices that we look at, right, I'll talk about a little bit philosophy that we follow, right? So when we look at the economy that we operate in, which is or the industry that we operate in, the main currency that we are talking about is performance and productivity. Right? Now, performance and productivity is an outcome. So if we try and link learning, right, to the outcome, which is performance and productivity, that's always the debate, saying that how do you know that the performance or productivity is an outcome of exactly the learning intervention that you intervened, right, or that you created. Because there's an ecosystem, right? That ecosystem includes manpower, that ecosystem includes incentive plans, that ecosystem includes, right, the ecosystem that in which the employee operates in. So the challenge is, how do you directly link learning to the performance outcome? And that's where the philosophy that we try and follow is that we don't try and link it directly to the performance outcome, but we try and link it to something which is the performance enabler, which will lead it to the outcome, right? So that means that there is a lot of focus on what are some of the good habits, let me call them, which lead to effective performance, right? Because when you shift to an performance enabler measurement, right, all those actions that enable you to lead that performance, that will lead to the result that we are talking about, right? So focusing solely on outcomes don't truly actually give us an impact measurement that we really want to see. So that being one case, right? The second important point that we believe in, right, that while we focus on matrices, right, it is the insight that we derive from this matrices will actually speak about true return on investment, right? So the numbers, they don't themselves give you a true picture or a true story, right? The question is, what insights do you derive from some of these matrices which are defined, right? And how do you see the matrices and what the story they tell them is pretty important. So when you look at creating a return on investment, we need to adopt a total systems approach, right? That means there has to be a feedback loop, and then there has to be a reinforcement loop. Because the feedback loop tells you, saying that what's going wrong in a training, right? And where do you need to intervene? Because a lot of challenges which organizations face is that they create the measurement after the training is done.
Right.
Measurement needs to be put before the training, right? Like Sandeep said, what is the problem that we are trying to solve, right? That being the case, I also feel that the ROI matrices for different life stages of training are different, right? So that means an ROI that would come in a BFSI segment per se, that comes in for a new joinee orientation, right, would be quite different, right? Maybe there you would focus a lot more on knowledge transfer, right? And then you would focus on how does the knowledge transfer gets converted into some of the enabling matrices, right? The ROI for another program could be completely different from an orientation program. So the question is, what is the life stage of an employee that you're talking about? What is the intervention that you're talking about, right? And how do you look at the ROI? Do you look at it in terms of performance, or do you look at it in terms of enabling matrices? Because at Piramal, we focus a lot on enabling matrices, or we call them as input matrices, which lead to good behaviors in long-term performance.
Sure.
So that's the point that I want.
Sure, thank you. And that actually, I have a follow-up question, and maybe again, it goes back to three of you. Keeping in view the quantum of the kind of trainings that would be happening, say in HDFC or a Kotak or even Piramal to a large extent, are you able to calculate ROI in all of the interventions, or is it very selective? And how are you able to sustain it? When there is quantity, is it easy to get the ROI, or is it very focused on very certain transformational capability development journeys that are happening? This is just a follow-up question.
So I can take it because it was there on from the audience as well.
Yes, exactly.
That question. So we are a little prudent about the effort that goes behind calculation of ROI because it's not easy. While theoretically I can say that, hey, it is L1, L2, L3, maybe L4, this is how you do it. All of us know that. But the moment Tanveer, is the one who has asked that question, you talk about 35 different sessions happening. Am I going to run after an L3, which, do a simple math with so many managers can take their inputs? No.
Right.
What we have done is to look at that, are there new offerings which has been brought into the organizational environment to stabilize that? We also need to validate. See, ROI is also a validation for learning professionals like us.
Exactly. Yes.
See whether that is fitting into the very need with which, as Sandeep mentioned, the conversation started with, or how Kaustubha mentioned that, hey, this is the rationale behind why we are initiating this need in the first place. So, what we have done is to look at to establish before we declare any program to be BAU, we do a complete 9 yards as far as ROI calculation is concerned. That is it helping the organization and the learner at the end of the day? If yes, then once it comes to BAU, we would agree with the sponsors that, hey, here is the foundational metrics that we would actually calculate, but we will not go beyond that unless we see that there's a change to which, it mandates again to go back to the drawing board.
Sure. Sandeep, anything different in Kotak, or is it similar when there is?
I
Is it
agree.
still? Yeah, please go ahead.
See, I agree with what Girish spoke about. For a bank, see, the volume or the number of employees, they don't really matter if we have been able to define the measurement, right? While L1, L2 are pretty easy to measure, but in a bank where you have multiple businesses, multiple departments and verticals, catching hold of data points and it's not the point that we don't know how to measure it. The point is the complexity of a bank with so many verticals, so many departments, and so many functions. How do you kind of collect, collate, and measure the data and play it back to them? The best part is that now with lot of these AI based tools, we are able to catch hold of the data, and there are multiple systems, right? So taking data out from the system and doing an analysis is a tough task. But level 1, level 2, it's a task. I think we have gained mastery over it. When it comes to level 3, we are still halfway, but level 4 we need to become better, and that will only happen if you have right source of data flowing into a single system that allows us to compile those and interpret and then send it back to the businesses, right?
Sure. And that actually, something what Kaustubha you mentioned, and I'm picking that point up before I navigate into my second question for all of you. While we all are familiar with, what is rightly being discussed on the ROI concept, there's also a concept known as the return on talent, which is ROT, which primarily takes a closer look at the value your employees bring. It's all about measuring how much, the investment in your team pays off through the other generated and applied knowledge. Now, ROT is concerned with the interconnectedness of various variables coming together. So my question is, while we are looking at ROI in a big way and something that all of you have explained, beautifully, how can L&D actually leverage this interconnectedness to strengthen the prime focus of any organization, which is human capital, and in achieving organization goals? So any take on ROT, which is return on talent overall? Any thoughts on that? And maybe Girish, if you are keen to pick this first before
Sure.
I.
So, couple of ways in which I have personally experienced, and that might not be from my current organization always. Overall, what we have done is to look at, one indicator like one was idea generation, right? How much, because of a particular learning offering which was provided, that audience vis-a-vis the rest, how much idea generation, which was also implementable, practical in the context of whichever organization that you're working on, was that generated out of a particular cohort. So that is one. From an interconnectedness standpoint, in the current organization, we are also looking at how we bring together some senior leaders to experience a simulation, which is a holistic view of a financial organization like ours. And are we able, now this goes into the qualitative aspects, right? Which we initially touched upon in the first question, that are they honest and enough to come back to us as larger HR team and say that hey, it did expand my view. I was taking decisions which was very vertical oriented, but now I'm able to pick up my phone and talk to the other teams which are dependent, either it is upstream or downstream to where my team is actually positioned in the entire workflow, and able to actually take a decision which is in the larger interest of the bank. Now, that is also for us a huge win, because you need to understand that, a very complex organization like ours, any decision would have a multi-fold impact, be it, human capital, or be it the numbers as far as the businesses are concerned. So, is it more coming from those individuals who adopted and completed certain learning offerings? That is definitely something we look out for.
Right.
Is that making an impact? Because that is also very much beyond the typical L1, L2s, L3s of the world.
Yes.
Difficult to comprehend in a quantifiable term, but you can feel it in the corridor conversation. You can feel it in the way they interact with each other. You can feel it in how leaders do meet beyond, the work space.
Right.
That the comrade, it's a catalyst for many other, work which can happen through conversations.
Right.
Which typically, there's an effort to put in there. So are we easing that out?
Sure. So what I understand, Girish, is informal ways of generating ROT, which would then eventually lead into an ROI. Yes. Cool. Thanks. Kaustubha, your take on the ROT part and interconnectedness.
So before I come to the ROT part, let me just take 10 seconds on the previous conversation on the ROI, right? Because that feeds into this. So the interesting word that you used was value, right? And a lot of times ROI is more a tool to justify the work we do, right? And if we are able to justify the value that we bring, right? Sometimes then ROI does not, I mean, it's not a very, very important aspect, right? Then you don't need to actually show or demonstrate ROI for each and every training that, because you are talking about the value that you are adding, right? And the value is demonstrated on past data, right? Analysis, patterns that you have observed, which will hold true for the future too, right? And at that point of time, when you make that paradigm shift, you don't need to justify the existence of the L&D team by showing ROI, right? Because there is an assumption that the value that you are adding is directly impacting the business that we are doing, right? So that's one. Now, feeding into the second piece, which is the ROT, which is the return on talent, right? The bigger question is also in the kind of industry that we operate in, which is the BFSI, right? Where you do not have a physical product, right? Unlike, let's say, a heavy machinery, a soap, right? Or a medicine. You don't have a physical, and sorry, I'm referring to all those experiences that I had in the past, right? You don't have a physical product, right? So where is talent, right, seen as, right, in conjunction to the business that we do? I see talent more as an enabler, right, with the product that we are selling or the product that we are operating with. Now, when you look at that, it's a very complex product, multiple complex products, right? Be it savings, be it loans, be it credit cards, be it insurance, right? So how do we look at the relationship between a talent and the product, right? That's number one, right? The second is how do we look at careers, right? Because you would have a large part of our segments today which enter as frontline, right? And how do they move within the organization, either linearly or let's say in multiple lattices? That's the second part, right? Because if that talent is not engaged, if that talent is not upskilled, right, you could have a lot of churning that constantly happens, right? And that's a problem which BFSI faces, that we have a large scale attrition at the frontline level. We have disengagement sometimes, right? So how do you keep that engagement, right, through learning? That becomes the second piece of talent. And the third and important piece, which is actually the first question, is who are the people that we are hiring, right? And how do we upskill them and get them on board, right? So that's also where learning and development also comes with an important perspective, right? Because everyone who gets hired goes through a value chain, right, of upskilling. Now, does the system feeds back to the recruiting team or to the talent acquisition team, saying that, hey, this is the pattern that we've seen. These are the people who do successfully well. These are the people who are able to consume knowledge well. So maybe you should look at recruiting this kind of people. So that becomes a very important factor, right? So those three aspects, I think, are very critical when you look at talent as a perspective.
Absolutely. And what you mentioned, Kaustubha, I think it's a very peculiar thing for the BFSI sector, because we are talking about ROI when we know the attrition rate is the highest amongst most of the industry, which is close to 40% that has come out in 2024. Establishing ROI when there's so much of churn happening is a task by itself. Sandeep, anything on ROT you would want to comment on before I move to the next question? Or
I think beautifully summed up by
yeah,
Girish and Kaustubh. Of course, return on talent. Any program that we do, what impact does it have on the talent? Uh, uh, I would say measure of the organization, right? So there are multiple ways through which we measure the talent readiness. We have internal transition programs which are based on the talent. Uh, uh, pool that we create, and yeah, so we measure those on a regular basis through your employee satisfaction scores, succession readiness, or the attrition rates as highlighted by Kaustubh and Girish. Yeah.
perfect. And I'll take this opportunity to, maybe talk about the other big thing that is impacting, the HR domain, and which is workforce analytics. And there is a lot of conversation around that, where HR technology is making a significant impact by utilizing data from, it's something that you mentioned, Girish, which is about employee interactions, could be about performance metrics, could be about engagement surveys, could be about organizations gaining valuable insights from their workforce strength and weaknesses that you're able to derive. There is an interesting, an India skills report, which is 2024, where organizations are actually using advanced workforce analytics, have actually seen a 15% increase in employee engagement and a 20% reduction in turnover. And that's where my next question comes from. Does database decision making elevate your L&D strategy? And in your current roles, how much of data is actually getting utilized for taking decisions or putting your entire L&D strategy in place? Any quick thoughts on that? Because as they say, data is the new oil, goes without saying, data is feeding into AI, but at the same time, how much of data is getting used as part of your work or your strategy? Yes.
See, if I go back to my 2 decades of learning and development experience, the biggest problem that we always had was data. We used to train a lot of people over the years. However, it was difficult for us to uh, capture their data points and then use the data and marry the source of their performance, productivity, talent readiness, skill, competencies, and our ability to generate reports. It was very, very limited. Uh, Learning management system or learning recording system, they came in, they played a big role in terms of our ability to at least get our data right. Today, we are placed in much better situation because every piece of data, every footprint that my learner leaves behind allows me to create a better strategy. Today, and when I talk about data, data is not just about the learning that happens. Every bit of communication that happens, every bit of feedback that comes today, we are able to use those feedback, and those feedbacks come from our employee engagement survey, our post-training feedback survey. When we have conversation with employees, we do transcribe those meetings or catch hold of exact phrases, and its data is not just about quantitative data, it's also about qualitative data. It's about the feeling, the sentiment. Our ability to capture those seamlessly has become much better, and today we are able to collate everything together and create our learning strategy in such a manner that's being appreciated by our learners as well as stakeholders. I can talk about an example. I had a brief conversation with somebody, and we designed a training program, and the lady said, "Tell me how did you understand my context so clearly?" So that's when I said, okay, it's all about capturing the right data. And today we have tools which allows us to capture your sentiments as well. And basis that we are able to deliver more contextual training programs, which sounds very practical, because many a times training programs were being termed as theoretical. These are all bookish knowledge. It doesn't really apply on the ground. But yeah, data and some of these data collection tools, I think, have been a great boon for learning professionals, not just learning professionals. I think it's for everybody.
True. Kaustubha,
So I feel data is both a boon and a bane, right? And that depends on how you use it, because
right.
it's a boon if you use it well, right? But the amount of data that is being churned nowadays, right?
Yeah.
If you do not use it well, there is a high probability that you could get lost in that data, right? And that's why, I completely resonate with Sandeep that when I look at my journey, right, over the last 20 years, right, it moved from a time when we used to collect all the data in Excels, right, to today when we have learning management systems. And when today's data, I look at it, I can't imagine the amount of analysis that we do now, right? We could have done it years back, right? So completely resonate on Sandeep on that, right? So one of the things that we do well, right, is of course, being a data and tech first approach company, right? there's a lot of focus on how do we look at data, right? So, like I said in my earlier discussion also, that there is a lot of focus on enablers of performance rather than performance itself, because performance data is very easy, but you cannot establish a direct correlation with learning. So you need to, I write one of the questions saying that how do you isolate the impact of L&D and claim ROI? You can isolate, if you isolate enablers of learning and create a linkage with enablers of learning, then it's much more easier to link it to, let's say, performance, right? So that's one. Second is, I think each learner is not the same, right? And a lot of our data helps us understand that each learner is not the same. We could look at creating learner archetypes, right? And then create what Sandeep said, context for that learner. So you could have a fresher, you could have a non-BFSI coming into BFSI, you could have someone with experience into BFSI, right? You could still segment it with saying that an insurance coming into bank, right? Say an NBFC moving into insurance. So there are so many archetypes that you could create with the data that is available, right? That's one part of it. The second part is when people learn, right, over a journey of learning over a period of time, uh, how can you use some of the inputs that they are giving during their learning journey to reinforce that learning journey back to them, right? So that's where your summative and formative assessments and how do you analyze those assessments and feed it back into the learning journey becomes important. So that means that a lot of times we work with proficiency tests for our organizations in various academies that we launch. So how do we look at proficiency tests, right? What are the zones or geographies that are scoring less on a particular question, right? Does that mean that there is a business issue, right? Because they are unable to answer that question, right? Does that mean that we need to do an intervention at that point of time? Is the amount of, let's say, detailing that comes out with this data, right? So, like I said, it can be a bane or a boon depending on if you decide to use it. And of course, you need like really strong systems which will give you those insights, because without insights any data is just information.
Perfect. So as Kaustubha says, it's boon and a bane. And maybe Girish, if you can just simplify it for the audience. We have a lot of people who have logged in. So what are the 5 ROI metrics that you would be tracking, or in general, it may not be relevant to HDFC, which can help look at the outcome that you get from your large scale interventions that are happening? So do you still refer to the Kirkpatrick model in general, or are there any aspects that you would look at?
See, it is little contextual to the organization and what are the priorities. So
Right,
it's
right.
typically anchored around the business priorities and then summing it up to organizational priorities as well, many a times.
Yeah.
And it can have, colors depending upon various initiatives which are either driven horizontally or it can be vertical. So I don't want to complicate it, but what we have looked at, or I've always encouraged organization to look at is efficiency and effectiveness metrics, E&E. Right. One is to look at all those quantitative aspects, like what has been the coverage, how much money did you pump in, what was the return around it, right? Effectiveness is all around, some of the softer aspects also which the organizations can benefit from, which can be indirect aspects, right? The quality of referrals, from that you get from your own team, without any remuneratory reward, maybe, for example. It also is an indicator of how people value individuals to come into the same set of organizational context. It's an indicator not only for learning, but for the entire organization per se. It can be about innovative practices which are being adopted, the process improvement ideas which got generated. So I would say effectiveness and efficiency are the broad umbrella.
Yeah.
Within that, you can definitely break it down further.
And depending on the organization,
you might have made a strategic investment, for example, in a learning experience platform. We also actually look at that. Okay, we invested X amount of rupees onto that.
Right.
What is the ROI of that kind of a thing? Is it creating efficiency for the learning administrators, which is typically the learning organization or the
Right.
larger HR organization.
Sure.
Or is it enabling us to reach to some of it, what you mentioned from a data standpoint? See, there was a point of time when L&D was creating a lot of data. I mean, we were actually creating surveys to get learning needs and then trying to solve it.
Right.
Now, if you look at many organizations, you already, if you are seeking out in the organization, there is enough data points already existing. N number of organizational surveys are happening today. All of them can give you inputs. Your
Right.
performance management philosophy can itself generate a lot of learning needs. You just need to plug in your AI enabled LMS LXP into that and see that, what would it throw it back to all the learners individually as well as collectively for the organization to focus on.
Sure. And you've summed it up beautifully, and that's for the audience to take, where Girish talks about efficiency and effectiveness. I do have a lot of questions coming from our audience, and I promise we'll take that up in the last 10 minutes of our conversation, and we'll try and respond to those questions. I'll quickly navigate towards, another aspect of which are the intangible things that don't get discussed. And based on a research report which is by Deloitte, where they talk about human sustainability to a large extent. And this refers to an extent to which an organization contributes to the overall well-being of its employees. And this could be by providing them opportunities for growth, development, equity, and a sense of purpose. It could be about, creating, ultimately, leaving them with increased employability beyond their current role. And that leads me into the next question, that while we are talking about ROI investment on leadership, managerial capability, we are talking about functional skill development. Is there a merit, and this is my question to the panel again, is there a merit in investing in intangible aspects like creativity and this whole conversation, which is absolutely essential in today's day and age, about mental wellness, well-being for the future? And if you are spending there, how do you actually get that ROI when you're talking about mental well-being and you're talking about things which possibly could be intangible? Any quick thoughts on that? Sandeep?
Yeah. So, see, today, with technology supporting us, a lot of work stress has reduced significantly. And the cognitive load that we used to have is gone down significantly. And I think our ability to learn new things, adapt to newer technology, make use of the tools which are available, will help us to navigate through our professional requirement much better way, and that reduces a lot of stress and a lot of issues that could build up, causing mental wellness struggles within an organization setup. However, uh, I think it's a great way to move beyond business matrices and talk about well-being and
Yes.
wellness as a metric. So what how is it impacting beyond businesses, right? Whether it is so at our organization we have 4 C's, and these 4 C's are company, customer, colleagues, and community. So whatever we do, we have to keep each and every stakeholder in the mind. And how do we kind of ensure that we are enabling them, empowering them solving their challenges? And at the end of the day, the job of any business is to support all these 4 elements. The job of any business is not to generate business. The businesses, at the end of the day, they support our customers, they support people, and there are people who are getting benefited out of it. So, towards the end, how are we impacting the lives of people? That's what matters.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Kaustubha, would you want to add that? And In the meantime, I would request my panelists, we have a lot of questions coming up, and if they're visible to you, if you want to pick any of those of your choice and respond to our audience. Kaustubha, any quick thoughts before we move
When
towards
you look
the
at
segment of the
yeah.
conversation?
So when you look at employee wellness, right,
Yeah.
I completely agree with Sandeep saying that sometimes you need to look beyond return on investment in the form of money.
Yeah.
Because the operating word that we are talking about here is not money, but psychological safety.
Yes.
Right. And when you need performance and productivity, you need to create an ecosystem in which an employee can thrive and become productive, right? That means he should be able to contribute to team effectiveness. He should be able to learn. He should be able to stay there for a longer time. He should be able to produce, right, and perform better. Now, all those things can happen if there is psychological safety.
Very
And
right.
hence, when you look at, let's say, organizations which invest in managers who can create a psychological safe environment, right? The return on investment in that case is not necessarily monetary, but the return on investment is better engagement scores, which can lead to better performance, right?
Right.
So maybe that's the value that we should look at when it comes to programs on well-being, right?
Right.
Because at the end, you cannot be an effective contributor, right, without bringing your whole self to work, right?
Absolutely.
And that means who you are, right? What's happening both personally, professionally. I mean, one of the things that at Piramal, the core value that we have is care, right? So that's one of our core values, right? And hence everything is designed with the core value in perspective. So we have a program called as Wellspring, right? So Wellspring primarily focuses on three pieces, which is vitality, renewal, and growth, right? So this looks at an holistic development of an employee, right? From performance, engagement, as well as growth. That is development, right? And I think organizations have started investing from that perspective, from a well-being perspective. Even in the BFSI space, where from the traditional approach of let's focus on products and processes to now focusing on psychological well-being of the employee is really taken seriously.
Thank you so much, Kaustubha. We would quickly move to the questions, and maybe I can just randomly pick up any one of you want to answer. I go to question number 2,
So,
which yes.
So Manu, if you don't mind, I'll pick up one question which
Perfect.
Rupali
Please go ahead.
has.
Yeah, that will make my work easier.
Yeah. So Rupali's asked, in your experience, how reliable is LMS data, like course completion or time spent in true reflection, learning effectiveness, and business impact, right? So the question here is a little more deeper in this, saying that it's not only about what is the data that the LMS gives us, but what do we do with the data, right? So a lot of times, course completion rate or time spent also reflect the engagement, right, when it comes to digital learning. So it tells you whether are participants finding the context or the content relevant, or are they dropping midway, right? Number one, is the content or context engaging enough to hook the participant on for a longer time? Now, once you start gathering that data and you start analyzing it, again, going back, information is information until it is converted into insights, right? So once you start pulling out those insights, what do you do with that, right? Is something which is very important because, like I said, digital learning has its ups and downs, right? How do you utilize it? So at Piramal, we have a program called a skill wallet, so which utilizes credits on the basis of digital learning. So every hour or every time that you spend, right, upskilling yourself, you get a credit, right? And that credit gives you a milestone, and then you are rewarded on that milestone, right? And what's more important is that has also helped us getting the user multiple times. So it's not a single use case for us, it's a multiple use case where users come in and enroll themselves to self-paced learning journeys. So it's important, what do you do with the data, and not only on collecting that data.
Perfect. I hope that answers the question. I am also looking at questions 7 and 8, which have possibly been answered, but can learning interventions really help organizations to control their attrition and retain employees? Happy to know what the panel thinks. And question number 8, can organizations surveys actually help to measure intangible ROIs?
I'll
Anyone?
take up question number attrition. I think uh, training is not the only vector which is
Yeah.
responsible for attrition. So, as I said, that when we have the conversation about what challenge we are trying to solve, it has to be very clearly communicated to the management, and we check with them, is it the only thing that will help reduce attrition? Or if there are five vectors, then we have to define what proportion or what percentage will training impact reduction in attrition. But yeah, there is a direct correlation between that. In an organization that I worked with, we ran a project where we kind of did not train people but train their managers, because the employee engagement or the GPTW survey or whatever survey that you do, or a Gallup survey, it clearly pointed out to some managerial deficiencies which was causing a stress and was leading to attrition. Once we are able to identify that through these surveys, because that's where these data came as input to us, we ran a structured program, and we were able to control that bit of attrition which was caused by managerial incompetencies. However, we will not be able to solve in entirety till other aspects. For example, have we done the comp benchmarking well? Are we competitive enough in terms of competition? Are we skilling them? Or there are newer competitors which are coming up with better technology. So there are multiple other aspects which ensures that people continue with an organization. But yes, the answer is yes. Training can directly contribute in reducing attrition, subject to all other vectors are also taken care of.
Sure. Thank you, Sandeep. And maybe we'll take one more question. We're nearing time. It's almost 5 p.m. And I find question number 4 very interesting. How do you convince senior leadership to invest in programs that focus on long-term behavioral transformation, which may not show immediate ROI? What is the convincing power, or with what conviction do you go and say that, hey, this needs to be done, although ROI may be scattered over a period of time? Girish, I see a smile on your face. Would you want to take that towards
One of the ways, one of the ways in which we have done it is that, make the decision maker himself experience learning.
Perfect.
So that is one, right? Because you can actually try to tell them that, here are the different metrics. These are the proof of the pudding. But once an individual experiences that, their perspective changes, the lens that the viewer would actually change. So that is one thing which we have been successfully and attempting all the time to ensure that they also experience what we talk about. Otherwise, it's like a little distant, like, hey, you are making this investment on this particular set of employees or potential talent. Here is what is expected. So, you are like, oh, okay, we are talking about numbers and things like that, but give them that experience. That is one aspect that we have looked at, to which has enabled us as well. Breaking the overall investment into smaller chunks in the here and now. What is the investment? What is the immediate return that we would get?
Right.
Can you articulate that? It's all about the power of articulation into those smaller sects, which is gullible to a leader who's, you go to and say that, we are looking at 100 CR kind of an investment. Anybody would say that, oh, I mean, we need to talk about it.
Understand.
Break it down, into in the next immediate year. After that, we will again come back to you, review it. That's the approach which has worked for us, right? And there is always a POC, there is always a kind of a gestation period, and then we can take a call. In large organization, that's a proven way in which it's better in terms of taking a calculated risk, if there is an inherent one, of not having an ROI. So that's the approach that we have taken.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we do have a lot. Yeah, Kaustubha, you.
Yeah, and to add to
Please go ahead.
One important point is you need to also look at where is the need coming from.
Yeah.
So usually at a very senior level, you run talent processes, right? You create career maps for them, right? And you create what could be possible next roles. So is the need coming from a transition to a particular role, and is that a derailer for that individual? Then it's much more easier to sell, right? But if the need is coming more from a developmental perspective, where let's say a group of individuals or an individual needs to undergo a journey, right? The challenge here always is in terms of uh, what is the ROI, right? Again, the base question, right? And if you are able to link it to a business problem that you will be able to solve, right? Saying that if those people undergo a leadership journey, what is the business problem we are able to solve, right? Be it getting the team upscaled in terms of where it is at that point of time, or let's say improving, let's say business impact or improving business productivity. I think that buy-in is there, because nowadays at a very senior leadership, the buy-in for learning is high, right? It's just that we need to articulate and connect the linkage of the business problem with what we are trying to do.
And Manu, I would just want to add, so one of those things, Kaustubha, absolutely. One of the aspects which all our L&D practitioners can also try out is there a way that, a business leader can actually talk about that need and say that, I endorse that, this particular approach, process, whatever,
Right.
has given me the result. And that is something that we can actually look at for an investment. So many a times you as an HR professional, you position a solution without any kind of an endorsement, that is also challenged equally. But if it in the room of the decision maker, there are business leaders who are going to vet it, saying that I have experienced it, it has worked for my team, there is an ROI which is quantifiable, we should definitely look at it. That also actually makes the entire proposition much more stronger.
Sure. Thank you so much. I know, Sandeep, you have to rush. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your participation. And I'm sure the audience have got tons of takeaways today from our esteemed panelists. And it's absolutely been a delight to have you with us, Girish. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kaustubha. Thank you, Sandeep. And just to summarize everything that we discussed today, to give you a quick synopsis. Employees represent an organization's most significant investment and its deepest source of value. And as businesses navigate through the economic uncertainty, and we are all aware of that, what's happening in the external world with all the tariff wars and the rapid technological changes that are happening, the change in the geopolitics with plenty of wars happening and the upheaval in the changing business models as well, because anything that happens on the other side impacts the business models as well. The talent systems must emphasize productivity and all about value creation. Having the right talent in the right roles and giving employees the support, opportunities, flexibility, mental wellness that they need to succeed. And that is critical for achieving the right ROI. Thank you so much to the audience for being so participative. And thank you, all of you, for being part of this insightful discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you,
so
Manu.
much.
Thank you, Girish. Thank you, Kaustubha. Have a nice day.
you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.